Hi everybody. Okay, so this is my second take on opposites and absolute value. So this is section 1.9 in your textbook, and I think you know a lot about these topics already. And I think I know you know what the word opposite means. So if I ask you what the opposite of A is, then you would likely tell me negative A. And if I asked you for the opposite of 2, hoping that you'd say negative 2. All right. What if I ask you for the opposite of a negative? The opposite of negative 3 is 3. And the opposite of negative 1/2 would be, of 1/2 would be negative 1/2. Well, let's talk about what happens. What if I add a number to its opposite? Well, hopefully you remember that if I add a number to its opposite, it yields 0. Now that's going to be really nice when we start adding variables together. So what if I add x plus negative x? Well, anytime you see a value and its opposite, they will cancel and you'll get a 0. Okay, so let's talk about what about when I give you an expression, okay? If I give you an expression. So looking at this expression, that actually is, because there's a negative in front of the whole unit, it's saying I want the opposite. So the opposite of 7 plus 9, we follow order of operations, and we'll get 7 plus 9, which is 16, and so my answer would give me negative 16. All right, let's see if I can scroll down on this. All right. Moving on. What about if I put a negative on the outside? That's saying the opposite of whatever's inside. So if I want the opposite of negative 1/8, that's going to give me a positive 1/8. Okay, so and you did learn last year that anytime you see a negative times a negative, it yields a positive. Okay. Evaluating opposites. This is where it gets tricky. So I want you guys to be very careful. Please be careful anytime you substitute a value into an expression or equation. I want to see you put it in parentheses. Very, very important. And here's why. All right, let me move on to the next. If I ask you to evaluate negative n plus 14 if n equals negative 8, what I want to see happen is you write negative, so that comes down. Then the value of n that you're given is negative 8 plus 14. Okay? The reason you want to do that is because if you don't, you may forget that negative in the front. And now you see that you have a negative times a negative, so that is going to give me a positive 8 plus 14, which gives me 21. So again, anytime, this is going to be really important for me, guys, anytime I evaluate or substitute a value into an expression or an equation, I want to see you put it in parentheses. Okay, so don't forget those parentheses. All right, one of my favorite topics, absolute value. And I know that you guys actually know a little bit about absolute value, but let me scroll up a little bit, okay? All right, so absolute value. Yes, the absolute value bars are these nice, hard-looking bars that kind of look like the number 11. But the definition of absolute value says that the distance from x to 0 on it is the distance from x to 0 on a number line. So because absolute value refers to distance on a number line, it will always yield a positive value. Okay, so let's look at some examples. What is, that is red, what is the absolute value of 2? The absolute value of 2 is 2. Because I think you've learned that when you put a number inside those absolute value bars, that anything inside it will make it positive when it comes out. Now the one thing I want you to be careful of is absolute value bars. These bars are not parentheses. They are not parentheses. And we're going to talk more about that in class tomorrow, okay? All right, let's see if I have more on this page. I do. All right, so what is the absolute value of negative 4? Well, anytime you take a number and you put it inside absolute value, because we're talking about distance on a number line, it's going to become a positive number. All right, so a positive 4. And I might have just skipped there, and I apologize. My hand pressed record again. All right, what about what is? Now, this I was a little tricky. I put a negative on the outside of the absolute value bar. And because absolute values are not parentheses, you can't distribute it into the absolute value bar. That's very important, okay? So this answer would actually give me a -3. All right, I think I actually have, no, I'm going to go to the next page. Go to the next example. Okay. What is, let me switch colors. What is the opposite of the absolute value of -5? That's actually what's being asked right there. So that negative on the outside is going to stay. Then I'm going to take the absolute value of -5, which is 5. And so my answer will be -5. Okay. Now I know you did all those last year, but let's talk a little bit harder. Let's make this more like Algebra 1. What if I say solve? Or I could say solve for x. So understanding what question's going to be asked is really important. Something that it's very big this year. Okay, so this question right here is saying what value of x equals 3, or is a distance of 3 from 0. So it's red, and let me bring this up for you. This is red. The distance from x to 0 is 3. So I want you to think for a second. Think. Use those wonderful brains of yours. Think of numbers which are 3 units from 0. Is there one number? Well, I know that from 0, if I go 3 units to the right, I'll get 3. But what if I went 3 units to the left? Where would I be? I hope I hear you saying -3. So the solution to this equation, this is an equation now because it has an equals, is that x could actually be 3 or -3. So it will have two possible answers. Okay? All right, let's look at another one. All right, what about the absolute value of -x equals 3? So this is saying what value of x can I put in there and what will my result be 3? All right, well, let's look at it. If I put in 3, I have that negative. Well, the absolute value of 3 is 3. What if I put in a -3? So negative 3 in absolute value. Well, the negative, because it's inside the absolute value, is going to become positive, so I'm going to get 3 as well. So the solution to this equation would be 3 or -3, okay? And I'm putting it in set notation. All right, so now I want you guys to think of one, I want you to consider one for class tomorrow. So this is the one I want you to think about for Monday, okay? The absolute value of x equals -3. I want you to think of what are the possible values of x. What are the possible values of x? Okay? All right, so that's our thinking for today, and that's all for now. I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I'm really sorry that the first video didn't post so well, but hopefully we got it taken care of. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.